Gentlemen, welcome to the B-Man Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning, and today I have my good friend, Luke Dill. Super excited to have a conversation with him. He is a former Green Beret and now has an awesome organization, company that he has founded. He's an instructor there, and it's Sojourner Fieldcraft. And so I've been able to do several trainings with Luke, including humanitarian trip we did in Central America. Super awesome. We've had some rad experiences together. Even and my kids were able to go along to some of those trainings. And just as a little side note, I'm still looking forward to Luke, you and me and my teens wandering through some foreign land, hopefully Scandinavia together, just in the wilderness, like doing some
Let's
rad volunteering. But anyways,
do it,
welcome to the
man.
show, brother. So glad to have you here. Why don't you tell us a story and kind of give us a background for everyone listening?
Yeah. So I 21 years in the military. First half was infantry. The second half I was special forces out of 5th Special Forces Group. And it was it was a wild ride. I can tell you that. For the first so from 2001, the summer of 2001 is when I began my journey in the military until 2016. I basically sort of lived for myself. My life consisted of, the military, whether it was deploying to combat or training, just living the lifestyle. But it was very much so for myself. And then in 2016, I was on a trip in the Middle East, and that was a trip where God basically told me, "You've run long enough and it's time to come home." And I went from that military sort of partying lifestyle, and everything changed. Everything changed, man. I spent that entire deployment reading through the Bible. I read the New Testament, praying and repenting each night. And then every week this is my favorite part of it, was I would throw my pack on and I would hike up into well, they weren't mountains, but I would hike up into the hills of where I was and just be. I go out there and pray, and basically like finding a new, like, I was really like literally just like I was piecing together the new me. I was like, what am I, how am I going to go forward? And finding, I don't know what the word, if finding my center, I don't know what the right word is for it, but finding peace and doing that while pursuing God. And it was absolutely fantastic. And it was transformative. What happened was I was on that deployment alone. So my special forces team, my ODA, was back in the States. Well, I
Wait,
left.
hold up. Like alone. It was just you running an operation.
No, I was with other people, but
Okay.
from my team, I was the
Okay.
only person
You're
that
the
was
only one.
sent.
Okay.
I'm being vague on purpose, and I
Yes.
apologize.
Right. Right. No. No. I understand.
And yeah, so I left, Luke, just a normal team guy that partied just like the rest of them. And when I came back, I was like, I can't do those things anymore. I have to be true to myself and true to all these changes that happened. And so we're sitting in the team room one day once I'm back, and the guys asked me, they said, "Hey, you want to go?" I was, going out to the local restaurant where we're going to have some, drinks and etc. And I was like, I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I had been praying. I was like, how do I tell the team? I was like, because I can either do one of two things. I can pretend none of the changes happened and go back to the old Luke, or I can be a man and stand up for what happened. And who cares what they think, type of thing. And I sat there and I was like, how do I tell these guys? Because, it was a little intimidating. And then one of them says, "Hey, let's go. We're going to go do this thing." And it's something we used to always do. And I was like, I can't really do that anymore. So I'm going to pass. I'm not going to go. And it was in this moment where I realized it was almost like God was handing me a freebie.
Yeah.
I was like, this is your moment. It's not going to get easier than this. Because one of them looks at me and he's like, "Hey, he's like, what? Did you ever come to Jesus moment or something?"
Yes, I
And
did.
that's when the whole thing, I was like, this is a home run. This is the easiest thing ever. And I was like, as a matter of fact, I did. And this dead silence in the room. And some of the folks weren't very happy about it,
Right.
but it's
Right.
okay. And so it was time for me to stay true to who I was and who I was learning to be through Christ, and, decide that no matter what, I'm going to go forward with him. I'm not going back ever.
Yeah. It's awesome. And
Yeah,
was it challenging to maintain that, or had you just like, hey, I'm done, and it was easier moving forward?
100% challenging to maintain it. It's been a learning process ever since. That was in 2016. I've messed up since then. I've learned since then. I've grown since then. But just like it changed, I had to change my physical habits. I had to change
Yes.
how I spoke. The
Yes.
cursing was out. It was no longer an option. The type of thoughts that I had,
Yes.
I couldn't look at women as if they're objects.
Right.
I couldn't I just couldn't do those things anymore. I couldn't go out and drink and party every weekend. That was it. It was gone. It was a thing of the past. And so yeah, it was challenging because it's just like you as creatures of habit, that's you get your go-to,
Right back to it.
your neural pathways, you're there. You're like, it's what you A plus B equals C. It's what you do. But then it's like, well, wait a second. It doesn't equal that anymore. And it's time to reprogram. And that takes discipline. And I've
Oh,
failed more times than I want to admit since, man.
let's talk about specifically about the mind game, because you and I and then the people listening, we all know it's like it all starts in the head. And if we can direct our thoughts, and at least you don't have to be perfect at it, but at least get markedly better at it, then it makes the actions, decisions, the habits, the patterns, the lifestyle much easier. What did you or have you found? I know you have. What have you found that's helpful in redirecting the thoughts, in changing the old way of thinking? Specifically, you mentioned perfectly, which is a perfect one for most men. It's like the way we look at women,
Yeah.
the way you notice women, and the way the mind will go certain ways. Well, with all kinds of things. But when you come back, you're a changed man. You had this amazing experience. You're like, I'm going to be different. How did you start directing that in your head?
Let me start with a little bit what drove me before. And it she died of leukemia when I was 7. That hurt. I had taken care of her. I was like, my dad was working, he was in the army, and then my older brothers were already in school. And so I stayed out of school the way I understand it. I was little. I stayed out of school to basically be her little assistant around the house when she was really sick. And when she died, it doesn't matter. This is true, false, whatever it is. It's what happened in my little head. It was partially my fault because I was like, well, wait a second. I just helped take care of her all this time, and she still died. And it's been a long time. And so how I remember it, how close is that to reality? I'm not sure, but I know that my mom died, and I know that I was, a little boy that lost his mom. And so that was the first major hit to my just view on life.
Yep.
And it is still with me today. And then my dad was killed in 99. We got hit by a semi, and it through the van. We flipped 3 or 4 times in the air and continued to roll over in the median. Sorry, it's kind of challenging to talk about. So we rolled over in the median, and then by the time the van stopped, it was upside down on its roof. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and so I just bounced around and felt like I was in probably something like a dryer, and where it was just, but all I could see was like air, ground, air, ground, air, ground through the windows, and just I was pinging around like a ping pong ball. When the van stopped, I was mostly fine. I had a scratch on my back and my ankle hurt. And this is a major accident. And I crawled out, and I was going basically from family member to family member to see if they needed help. And I didn't know what that was. I just knew that something bad happened and I needed to check on everyone. And I get around the van, some family members are knocked out. Some are just kind of sitting there in pain, laying on the ground. Um, my little brother, we helped him out, and I went over to my dad, and I went up next to him, and had been thrown from the van. He was killed instantly on impact. And what happened is his head got crushed in half. But let me tell you, when I went up to him, he was laying on his side. I looked at my dad, and what I saw was him sleeping. No blood, no deformities, absolutely nothing. It just looked like he was sleeping, but I knew he was dead.
Yeah.
So what that was, I believe it was God. Maybe, some people might think, hey, he's just in a traumatic situation. His brain's protecting him. Whatever you want to think,
Yeah.
I believe God protected me that day
Yep.
from that sight. And it was challenging because my dad at that point had remarried. And so I went back over, and my stepmom was laying on the side of the road, and she was asking how dad was. And that was where I had a moment because I wasn't sure she was going to live if I told her. And so I sidestepped around it. And so I didn't let her know in that moment that he had already passed away. And it was really challenging. So from that, I didn't care anymore. It was in 99. I was probably 15 or 16, whatever I was. And I stopped caring. I was like, whatever, didn't go to church anymore. And I was pretty mad at God. And so that's why I say from I have realized that I needed to leave the area because I was making choices that were progressively worse, that were toxic to my own life and to those around me. And my stepmom helped me realize that I needed to go in a loving way. She was doing it to save me, basically.
Right.
And so I was like, Dad was in the Army. I can do that. So we worked through that process, and then I went and joined and started basic training a month after I turned 17 in June is when I went in 2001. And so I was in for 11 months before I turned 18. And so basically the Army finished raising me, which good or bad, that's what happened.
Not the best parent.
Yeah. So I used to have a baby face, and I basically looked like a little kid in basic training at that point. And but what happened, the reason why I needed to say all that to say fueled my day with hatred. It's how I refilled the engine. It's how I got through the day. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. One of my favorite songs was from Slayer, and it was called God Hates Us All.
Ooh.
And that's how delusional I was at that time. I was mad at God, unrightfully so.
Well, and
He literally kept me alive.
understandably so. And I love to hear you articulate this because that's what was driving you.
Yes.
Without something else to grab onto. Like, why do you get up and do what you do? It's like it was anger and hatred.
Yeah. But
Wow.
it was also pride and selfishness because just like maybe it's similar to how kids will go off to college and act a fool. And so here I am, I'm not in the home anymore. My parents are gone, so what do I care?
Yeah.
And so I'm just, doing things I shouldn't necessarily do. I mean, I was a fine soldier or whatever, but like I also wasn't the most responsible guy in the world as well, like off duty. And so I would say it was selfishness as well because I was like, I'm living for myself. I don't care anymore. And so I did that for a long time. I made a lot of mistakes in the entire time. So like for me, war was easy because it's simple. It's you versus me or us versus you all. And what we're there for. And like life back here was challenging because my personality was wrecked. And so I didn't know how to interact with people because of my distorted view of reality, because everything that had happened. So war was simple. It was terrible, and it was destroying my mind in new, exciting ways. But it
made
it
sense.
it made sense.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I stuck with it for a long time until God did what he did in Saudi Arabia.
Amazing. And then so okay, let's go. Thank you for telling that story. I've heard that story before, and it always impacts me, man.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I actually forgot so that was all to build up to what your question was, and I never
Okay,
answered
go back. Yeah, go back.
What was your question again?
Well, it was just like it's like how did you start redirecting your thoughts when they were trained and your neural connections were one way, and then you started shifting, right? And obviously you had a major shift in your whole paradigm for life too,
Yeah.
in that thing.
So it used to be hatred. I loved it. That's what fueled me. But then it could no longer be that. And so without Christ, it was hopeless. I was never going to change. And so I began with prayer, and I began with meditating on the word and focusing on God, all the while messing up and tripping my way forward. But it was conscious efforts internally to say, you know, it's like when you wake up in the morning, and some people like to have a cup of coffee, or like it's just like you learn that it's like, oh, I'm driving to work, I need a coffee, and whatever other habitual thing you have. So it was time to say, when those triggers, whatever those triggers were, kicked off the next like automatic response, whether it was swearing, whether it was staring at some woman, or whatever you want to fill in the blank with it. I could no longer do that thing anymore. And
Right.
so it required me to reflect in the moment, what am I supposed, like, how do I need to act now?
Yep.
And just gradually through this process, and it still probably will never end, it's just like, is my decision going to honor that other person? Is it going to honor myself? Is it going to honor my loved ones? Is it going to honor God? Or is it going to destroy them? Whether they even know it or not, is it destructive or is it productive?
Yep. I love that framework, and a powerful question, dude. I love that, Luke. I love that. Like, am I honoring myself, especially the best version of myself? Am I honoring God? And am I honoring or even respecting that other person
Yeah.
with just this thought? And that'll prevent those actions as well. That's awesome. I love that. Let's go back to your story. What made you want to go to the special forces when you just go enlisted in the infantry and then decide to go to a totally new level? That's a different commitment.
It was 2009 and through 10. I was in Iraq again. And I spent basically that year like contemplating. I wanted to do something new, because in the infantry, you're very restricted. Your left and your right limits are very, do this and stay inside this lane. And I had a problem with that, because I wasn't allowed to operate where and when I wanted to operate. So for me, it was too restrictive. And so I spent that year, I was either going to, option one was do warrant officer flight, because I've always wanted to fly helicopters. And I don't think that'll ever go away. It's just super neat. And option two was try out for special forces. And ultimately, basically, I couldn't put down the gun, because I was just like, being in the moment and being on that field, being on the front lines for some reason was just something, I don't know. At the time, it was just built in.
Yeah.
I mean, there are folks that did a lot more. There's always someone that's had done more heroic, more amazing, more outfilling them, all of it. But, I got to do my part, which, was what it was. But I went special forces, their motto being free the oppressed.
Love that.
And I did that because, so man, I I went combat arms in part because my dad, but also in part because I thought internally, I was like, well, I'm already damaged goods. I was like, I might as well just do this so someone else doesn't have to. And as I was going from deployment to deployment, or just in training, or seeing other soldiers in pain in life in general, even though I was living the type of lifestyle I was living, God was always there.
Yeah.
And there was always a part of me that wanted to help others. And I just didn't want to talk to him. And on deployment in the infantry, I could see people in pain, but you're just this machine,
Right.
As a whole, as the group, you're there for a thing, and you can't deviate very much from that. And so going special forces, I enjoyed it because I knew some friends that went and did it. And then also I was like, they fit, I thought, my personality a little bit better, because I was like, they're more autonomous. They get to go, they get to make more decisions. They're, working on their own, which ended up being mostly true. They're still military, so there are still restrictions, which sometimes is a good
but
thing.
way more autonomy and more capacity to
Yeah.
do so much
And
more.
one of the biggest things that I just couldn't stand in the infantry is the infantry is it's like a shotgun blast. It's great. They're necessary. Don't get me wrong. But you're going to a mass of soldiers, and you may or may not be near the enemy. You may or may not be near any type of part of the action because all the areas need to be covered.
Yeah.
Whereas with the special operations, it's more pinpoint. You're going to
This
something.
location.
You're not just going
Right.
to go. Like it's for a reason, and
Right.
and so I
That's
that was big.
interesting. It's more precise. It's like
Yeah.
this unit is going to take care of this problem.
Yes,
Did you
and that was
were you
feeling.
were you in combat in the infantry? Were you in
I
situations?
was, yeah,
Because
yeah,
those were war times. Those years were war times.
yep,
Okay, you're in
yeah.
that.
I was in. I did 2003 to four. I was in Iraq in the invasion, and then I did a year in Korea, which was not combat. We were just up near the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, and then again I went to Iraq in 2009 and 10.
Okay. And so then in the special forces and then all kinds of missions, I imagine, and things you
I went here and there with them. Yeah.
probably can't talk about.
Well, it was focused on the Middle East,
Right.
so that's mostly in the Levant
And
area.
so you did, which is also super cool, you did learn to speak fluent Arabic, right?
Well, yeah. Yeah, I did. So we had limited interpreters, and most, special forces guys are supposed to learn the language to their
Yep.
area. And I started out learning modern standard Arabic, and I was so proud of myself because I got a decent grasp on it, in the schoolhouse. And I thought I was pretty good, right? In certain conversational
Right.
areas. Certainly, I would never call myself fluent. Even now, I can get by. Like I could live over there, but I wouldn't say fluent.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was in Jordan, and I belted off this whole line of instruction to some folks, and they were just completely had no idea anything nothing, dude. And I was like, I finished it. I was like, yeah, I got that whole thing out. I was so proud of myself. And ended up being that the soldiers didn't speak modern standard. In that area, they spoke Levantine, which is a different dialect.
Yeah.
And so it was literally there was like some officer in their unit. He was, better educated. He basically was the interpreter.
He's like,
Yeah,
dude, total,
true.
total miss here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, man, I really don't know. I missed the mark big time. And so later on, myself and a few other guys, we switched over and we studied Levantine.
Fantastic.
And that ended up being in the Levant. That's the language you actually want to know.
Yeah, I
And so
love
that
that. I think I've told you before. I've committed to become fluent in a new language every 5 years, and I'm on another one. I'm doing Portuguese right now, and finishing up French. But I think Arabic will be next. I want to learn to speak Arabic. So
it's
it's tough.
prepare yourself.
Yeah,
It's incredibly
yeah.
challenging, but it's a lot. It is a lot of fun.
It's a cool one. I love it. Whenever we were in Egypt um and we were just in Morocco again. Yeah, I just love it. I love hearing it. It's so cool. Okay, I got a couple of different places I want to go. One, back to this idea of special forces versus kind of the normal troops, and I think you articulated that well. I think there's a principle there for all of us in maybe every aspect of life that we can go into our health and fitness. We can go into our marriages. We can go into parenting, and we can do it kind of at an infantry level where it's super basic and we're super limited because of our basic, or we can go it into a kind of a special operations level where we can say, you know what, I'm gonna, and I want you to maybe even talk to this, like, what's the real difference? What's the real difference between just regular infantry and special forces? From my outside perspective, having never been, so much of it is training and preparation, right? And what
Absolutely.
is it that makes the difference? What creates the freedom and the capacity? Is it the training and preparation?
So I don't want to make it sound like I'm bashing the infantry.
Right.
they're essentially they're a different tool in the toolbox,
Right.
designed for a very specific thing. That thing being more mechanical and, go in and smash. But, there's a lot of good humanitarian style things the infantry is a part of as
Yep.
well, throughout. And
A lot of really good people.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's what are they for? And one of the things I would say is the infantry is their purpose is, a specific thing, and they're the main fighting force with all of the support and different other combat arms,
Yep.
Basically providing aid to them, which without the support elements providing aid, the infantry wouldn't be able to do anything. They wouldn't be able to feed themselves. They wouldn't have nothing. And so, but they're that blunt object that goes in and smashes
Right.
until they're told not to smash anymore. And that's where, with the special forces being more precise and being able to go in, we're not holding ground. It's not so that we can do smaller numbers. But I would say that the different mission sets attract different personality types. And so you spend so much time in, the world of the infantry. You're going to think that way. You're gonna process things that way. And then when you go into the special operations, it's a different culture, and it's a different mentality. So it's two different lifestyles, almost, if that makes sense. Absolutely different. My experience, it was almost like I had two careers, and each one was half of my Army time. And it was like my time in the infantry and then my time in special operations. And they were related, but I would say completely different.
Very different. Oh, for me personally, I just love the distinction there. And I think there's some lessons for us that if we wanted to approach things differently, even the mindset or the lifestyle or the way we think about things, there's another level, and I think we can take it. And you're right. I think it is kind of for personalities maybe or desired outcomes. But I think there's some lessons there we can all take and say, hey, if we want to do things differently, we want to get different results, we want to have a different approach. I think there's some powerful lessons.
And sorry to interrupt, but this maybe is important to add here. And one of the soft truths is humans are more important than hardware.
Yep.
And it's because of the nature of, special operations and what they're designed to do. They can focus more on that, where the conventional forces, humans are important there too, right? But also they've got a huge machine to deal with.
Yep.
But with humans being more important than hardware, that's our side. That's civilians. That's family members back home. And to be honest, it's even the enemy themselves is, for me, is if I'm going to stay true to Christ, then while I'm going to fight, well, I'm retired now, but like I would fight, but I'm not going to fight folks out of hatred anymore.
Right.
I'm going to still honor those people. And the hardest thing that I had to do was to forgive ISIS. I mean, and it comes down to, we were soldiers deploying in support of a nation. It's in their way, it's the same thing. They are militants that are going forward to support their cause. And so while I don't agree with their reasoning, they still are there because they're doing what they believe in. And regardless, God created those humans.
Yep.
And so I have to find it in my heart. It's my responsibility to forgive them. And they've killed friends of mine. But if I want to be forgiven, and if I want to heal, no matter who hurt me, it doesn't matter. And so for me, it's easy because it's like, that's like an extreme thing, right? And like, the enemy, right? In combat, like that's pretty crazy. I get it. But it almost makes it easier, if that makes sense. Because it's like, well, God said, forgive. Okay, that means everybody. I can't pick. So I have to forgive them and try to process and move on. And it's hard.
That's super hard. Okay, I want to ask this because I know you're still a warrior. And correct me if I'm wrong, you would still fight an enemy.
If necessary, yes.
If necessary. And
Yeah.
on your terms, right? So let's just talk about this. I'm curious. And I had to think through this myself because I'm the same. I believe like we have to forgive and we have to honor human life. And and yet we still, I think, have to protect ourselves and our families and
Yeah.
protect people who can't protect themselves and and fight if necessary, right? If if
Yep.
if violence is necessary, I have settled in my mind that I can be violent and I can
Yes.
fight, right? And still, well, there's this book that talks about having a heart at peace or a heart at war. And I can protect and be violent if necessary and still have a heart at peace. What are your thoughts on that?
I think psychologically, once you go down that route, you can never leave it again. Like you can process it, you can come to peace with like if you were in fact if you had to take an action, right? You're gonna remember it forever because it's not normal,
Right.
you know? Maybe I'd say it like this. So, and I'll use this sometimes in that, okay, there's a family in their house, right? And this family, they intruder breaks in, right? In this state, it's legal. If someone breaks in, you can terminate the intruder, you can kill them, right? So, exact same scenario, family in the house, scenario A, and then family in the house, scenario B, same criminal, same exact thing, two different stories. So, in scenario A, the intruder breaks in, and the father says, all right, it's go time. I'm going to take this person out. And they're in their heart, they're excited. And the reason why they're excited is because they get to kill an intruder, right? And they do it, right? Afterwards, they're found not guilty because, in the eyes of the law, in that state, that's allowable, right? But in his heart,
He's
he
guilty.
murdered that person.
Yep.
And in scenario B, the man of the house he does the same actions, but what happens is in his heart he says, I have to do this
I
in
have
order to
no
protect my
desire to do it. I
no
have to.
desire to do it, but it's a necessity to
Yep.
keep his family safe.
Yep.
And I think that he killed them, but that's different. One is murder and one is killing, and
I
it's totally
totally
it's
agree.
a heart thing,
Yep.
completely in the heart, because one found pleasure in it and one did not.
Yep. Totally agree. That's a great way to describe that. Okay, on this related topic, let's talk through for a minute just being a protector. You're married now. What year did you get married?
In 2017.
And tell us about your kiddos. So 2016 is where you had your change.
Yeah.
And 20 did you meet her after you changed?
I met her before.
Okay, so you already knew her, but you changed.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
then so she had to jump on the bandwagon too.
Really? So she wasn't
I
already
mean, she
going
was
down.
familiar,
Yeah,
but yeah, so we went through that journey together.
that's
And
awesome.
we both had a history of going to church in the past, but truly that transformation was for both of us to go through.
Which is so powerful when you're
Yeah.
doing it together. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And got a couple of kiddos.
Yeah. I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and our third son is on the
Man,
way, and is due in about a month.
that's awesome.
I'm so excited.
And another little boy. Oh, that's awesome.
And I'd say one of my favorite things is while my wife went through sort of the tail end of my career, she did have to deal with some deployments, which were shorter in special forces than conventional army, but still hard. We're
Yep.
apart. But my sons never had to live that life. They never had,
They
because
didn't
we
have to
got
experience
started
it.
later, they're young.
Yep.
And so they never had to watch dad walk out the door and not come home for 4 or 5 months.
Yep.
which
That makes
is
a
which is
difference.
one of my
That's
favorite.
a heavy price.
Yeah.
Wives and
And a
children
lot
have
of
to
guys
pay.
did that, you know. A lot of guys in the infantry, which I think is actually harder because they are gone for longer periods. Of
Yeah.
course, in special operations, we're gone for shorter periods, but even when we're back home, you're going to this school, you're going to that school. So a lot of times you're gone anyways. But my sons, like they were young towards the tail end of my career, so they're not going to have memories of dad going to war. They're just going to hear stories about it.
Love it. Okay, let's go there. I want to talk about being a protector, but let's go there since you brought it up. Time with our wives, time with our children, right? The what I have observed and experienced, like we have to make it a priority to give both quality and quantity time to our families, right? And bring
Yeah.
them along as much as we absolutely possibly can.
I learned this the hard way. And I'm going to do this in a way that doesn't dishonor anyone. After I left the military, I went to work for somewhere else, right? And for a time, that's how we met, and I got to go help some folks. So I got to meet some awesome people. So I'm not going to bash at all. What I will say in that place, during that time, my time wasn't respected. And I also was guilty of giving up more of it than I should have because I believe in helping people.
Right.
And so in turn, that was abused. But what had happened was during my time in that organization, made mistakes. And here they are. So my first mistake was I did not allocate time to study and pursue God. I continued to go to church, but my personal pursuit of, reading the Bible on a regular basis, praying, and it's really just doing what I was supposed to do to pursue Christ was at best lacking. And so on that level, I was failing. And then my family, they were getting what was left of me.
Yeah,
Because
leftover.
I even working from home, and because this would come up and that would come up, and how can we help these people? And all the while, I'm trying to help all these other people, which I'm still happy to have done. I'm I don't want to say neglecting my family, but it's also probably kind of fair to say that I was neglecting them because they were getting what was left of me at the end of the day. And it's not fair and it's not right.
Right.
And so that was the second fail, is my family was suffering through that. And in the moment for a while, I didn't see it
Right. Because it's
until,
so hard to see. It's
yeah.
so hard to see when you're in it.
And because you're like, what? It's just this one thing. I'm going to go, I'm going to do this. I'm going to finish it. And then, well, there's always something that's going to come up. And so I neglected God and I neglected family in a sense. And then also, my inner core, everything came second to that organization, you know? And so I actually heard this from a friend of mine, and he told me that, and he doesn't even remember saying this. We were sitting there having a meal one day, and he said basically so he owns his own construction company. They do beautiful homes, and he told me one day, he said, because I was talking to him about this whole ordeal, and he's just like, for him, what he does is it's all about your priorities.
Yep.
You prioritize, what are you going to prioritize? And for him, it was God, family, and inner circle, basically. And so he said when a new opportunity would arise, would be presented to him, he would run it through this simple algorithm and be like, does this new opportunity get in the way of my pursuit of God? Does this get in the way of me being present with my family,
Yep.
loving them, and being the father that I should be? Does it get in the way? And does it get in the way of any other major priority?
Yep.
And if the answer is yes, it does get in the way of one of his main priorities, then the next question is, can this new opportunity be modified so that it does not get in the way of God, family, your inner circle, whatever it is? And if the answer is still that it will get in the way, boom,
No, it's out. I
out.
love it.
No, thank you. And
Love it.
you got to know when to say no.
That's a
Doesn't matter.
fantastic filter.
Yeah. And it was so simple. Like literally, he's probably just like saying it in the moment, but he believes it, but he was just saying it. And that stuck with me. And I was just like, dude, and I've used it since then, and I've had to say no to some,
Yep.
what could be some neat things because they would just pull me away from my priorities. And
Yep.
it would just be like before.
Exactly. And
Can't have that
I
now.
love that framework. I've used something similar to that, and now you have too. It actually makes decision making easier. At least, well, you might still want to say yes, but you know what you should say. It's like it makes it clearer. What
It's more
things are yes, what
simplistic.
things
Yeah.
are no. Yeah. You're like, hey, is this interrupting with things that truly matter most? I think the problem is so many of us, we say that God is first, we say that family is first, but man, when then we find ourselves, well, like you were saying, well, just this one more thing, and it's just for
Yeah.
a time, it's just a little bit, and then I get to work with guys who did that for 10 or 15 or 20 years, and then their marriages fell apart, and their kids wandered off, and they're really struggling, and they're looking back saying, "Man, don't do that. Don't
Yeah.
do that. The cost is too heavy." Man, that's awesome. Great insights there. Okay, let's talk about being a protector, and then I want to talk about your business and what you're doing and how that fits into both, fatherhood and manliness. But I guess so. Tell us about your business, and I think that fits in with being a protector and a provider. So tell us what you're working on now and what you're doing, and then just kind of walk through your kind of philosophy around protecting, providing, being prepared.
Okay. So I founded Sojourner Fieldcraft, and there's a story behind that, but I'll start with what we do. So I do bushcraft and survival courses for folks and take folks out, and I like to do it in a manner to where, it's crawl, walk, run training methodology. And what I do is I throttle the intensity of each event to the individuals in it. So I max out how many people are allowed to come because I don't want a crowd. I
Right.
want small group so every person can feel like their questions can be answered and we can focus on what they're doing. So if I have too many people, then I can't focus on individuals, and
Yep.
that's not okay. And so we do the small group classes where I like to teach people they're capable of far more than they might think they are.
Yes.
Through those defense mechanisms over the years that they've set up. Oh, I'm not going to go past this, so they create their own barrier in that subject area. Now something happens, over here, and they create a barrier over there, and it just builds up all around. And so we create this shell around us. And I know this because I did it. And then what those barriers that we end up creating over time become a cage.
Yep.
And you've got to at some point when I realized it, I was like, man, what am I doing? I was like, I'm limiting my own life because I've created this cage around myself. And so, break through that, get rid of that nonsense and move on. And I'm not saying it's easy, but when I take folks out to train, it's, watching people's face light up when they light their first fire without matches or a lighter, when they're using tools like this to start that fire, to build their shelter, purify water, whatever the subject area is that we're going over, to show them, hey, you can do this. It just takes a little bit of practice, but it's there. And so to watch their faces light up is just absolutely the best. And so we throttle training to
Wait, can I
how
pause for a second, interrupt you? Sorry. I want to
yeah,
emphasize that. The skills you teach, I think, are extremely useful. Like they're practical and useful. But some people might see those skills and be like, dude, I'll never do that. I'll never need that. And maybe you won't. But what you just described is worth it just for that. Go
yeah,
have the experience so you can have the inner transformation break free from those cages. And the skill you're teaching is just it's a vehicle.
Yeah.
But the transformation and the experience is priceless. And if we can do that as a family and help our kids have those experiences while we ourselves have those experiences, like literally priceless in a family culture, in a family dynamic, in a family legacy.
Well, it's family and it's in whatever business, whether you're a business owner, you're
Yeah.
part of an organization or whatever it is, because like, yeah, you started the fire, who cares? You may never do that again. But it's to build that confidence in
Exactly.
oneself.
Yep.
And so when you take that, like I can do all that weird stuff that guy taught me out in the woods. And so now I'm going to have more confidence to tackle whatever the thing is I'm doing.
Exactly. To
And
solve
or to
problems in the
be there.
office or in the clinic. Exactly.
And one of my very favorite things is when family members come together. And because, so to go into why we started it, the core of it is to help people grow closer together and hopefully closer to God. I ended up going to Guatemala for a mission trip. And, I went down there. It was kind of probably a cookie cutter mission trip. We're going out to an orphanage. We're going to go help some people build some stuff and etc. I wasn't going down with this like, savior complex. I was appreciative that I was being allowed to go and be part of God's movement,
Yep.
to be a part of what he was doing. And I probably got more out of going down there than the locals got out of me. You know what I mean? And so it was an amazing experience. And it was in Guatemala City, and it was this wonderful orphanage with a lot of folks with big hearts taking care of these kids. And there was a huge wall around this place. And it was like the city was enveloping.
Mhm.
And I don't think that a lot of folks were excited that an orphanage was there because it was good real estate,
Mm.
but it was staying strong and it was there. And those lives were being transformed and kids were being saved. And it was fantastic. And it was really special being allowed to be a part of it for a time. Well, when I came home, I couldn't shake the feeling of this sanctuary, because I had got to experience it down there. And I was like, I would like to replicate a version of that. I was like, I don't know how to start an orphanage, but I like to camp, you know? And so this dream sort of one step at a time kind of developed and is still developing. And I was like, I can use survival and bushcraft as my platform. And like you said, this is just like, doing these skills, with a ferro rod, starting a fire, you're just starting a fire. While it's important, that's not the point. The point is to
Exactly.
let people grow together and learn more about themselves and break through these barriers. And it's been
Yes.
an absolute pleasure. It's therapeutic for me. And I hope other folks get a little bit of something out of it as
I
well.
love it. And are you still hosting events at your place, the place where I've been?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we
It's
do.
awesome. I have some amazing memories there. And it's just some amazing, like you've set it up so well. I've got some pictures on my phone still of the stars out there.
Good.
I love that place.
We just held an event out there last weekend, and the skies were
Wow.
absolutely crisp,
I
crystal
love
clear.
it.
It was
Love
the
it.
stars were amazing.
That's so
And I got to take my oldest son out there.
that's awesome. In August? Bro, that's hot.
Dude, it's cool. It's cool right now for some
What?
reason. It was
Oh, that's
absolutely
awesome.
wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Oh man,
Yeah.
I think that could be hot and humid there.
It
Fantastic.
should be,
Okay.
but I don't know why.
So he and I, before we started the recording, he showed me he has this new pocket guide. Amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And so that'll be coming out hopefully soon. And so those of you listening you're going to want to have that. If you want to do any backpacking, you want to do any camping, you want to live and ever leave your home, you should have that pocket guide. Then you have the courses at your place, and small businesses or families can go out there. I don't even know if you offer this, but I know I'm going to plead with you one day to come, like I said at the beginning, to come with my family somewhere and go have an experience out in the wilderness. Like, I
Yeah.
want
So
you to teach me and my kids like legitimate survival stuff in some foreign wilderness. Like, I can't, but I sound crazy, but I can't think of anything more exciting than that.
I'll tell you, I'll put it this way. it is part of our I've had some folks ask me to come out and train them. And so while it is, a small business and we're developing the sort of infrastructure to it, the answer is 100% yes.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be a case by case basis. On some folks want me to go down to Texas and do a class down there, and you name the country and we'll go do it.
Yes, exactly.
And so yes, I will travel to wherever, because it's only like some people can come travel to where my property is.
Yeah.
And so I'm helping a little bit of the population. And so this actually came into a lot of the processing I was doing. I was like, I have a very select sort of group of people that can come. Like, one, you have to afford to come to the land, and then two, you need to be willing to go and do this and embrace it. I was like, so I'm not getting the rest of the nation. So I'm like, so we'll travel. So that solves that. And do custom classes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll do that 10 times out of 10, because if we could fulfill our purpose, then we need to figure out a business model that can handle it. And so that's where that whole, humans are more important than hardware.
Yep.
It's still remains true. And so with the business, I would absolutely, I will travel.
I love that.
And then another part of it, so we started building those campsites. I don't know if you saw them out there.
Yep.
On the land. And so we're setting it up bit by bit with the infrastructure to make it to where folks who can't go in the woods, who aren't physically capable for whatever reason, I still want to help them. And so I was like, how do you do that? I was like, it needs to be a little bit more comfortable. And so on the hilltop, that's where we've got the camp pads set up. And so we can host, more relaxing events. So if folks don't want to go deep into the woods and get ticks on them, they can still come out and then still experience the stars and still experience that, hopefully, transformation.
Yeah, transformation. Exactly. I love that. Okay, let's key in on kind of some of your thoughts and frameworks about being prepared as a husband and a father. Like, where does preparation fit into a true vision of manliness, and especially as a formidable family man?
It's a great question. I think for me, so if you look at, so I'll start with this. So with faith. So faith, understanding who I am and being grounded in that is necessary so I can be consistent for others around me. And so I can be dependable, in every category as often as I can. And so when I look to Jesus, he came with all the power he has and had. He came as a humble servant and, allowed people to treat him the way he did. Some treated him well, some terribly. And he remained a humble servant during his lifespan here. And I like to, if anything, to look at a role model. That's the guy, is to go back and look at that. And so that's the first part, is having a strong faith and allowing that to be Christ, to be sort of my moral compass, and striving to be like him, tripping along the way, but never giving up. And then survival school allows me to continue to do sort of manly side of things, the exciting getting out in the woods, starting a fire. And that is instead of hatred refueling me, it's stuff like this now.
Yeah.
And so I go out in the woods and I go do this. I build a shelter. I do, I go on a hike. And if I can bring my family, I do, because they love it out there too. And that stuff refuels me and allows me to be a better husband and father, because that part of me is fulfilled. And I'm filled there, and I can pour that directly, basically just right back out to my wife and kid.
Yep. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then you're keeping, in addition, you're keeping your mind sharp and your skills sharp. It's like one of my core beliefs that I'm constantly thinking about is this idea that I want to be useful.
Yeah.
I want to be an asset, right? And in a very real way, we can be a liability or an asset. We can be helpful, we can be useful, or we can actually be a drain or a draw on other people. And it's possible for all of us because of our weaknesses and our strengths. It's possible to be an asset in one area and a liability in another, right? And we're not just going to be across the board. And so we're all working on that. We're all struggling along, trying to figure things out. But overall, I want to be an asset. I want to be useful. I want to keep my mind sharp, my spirit sharp. I want to keep my body sharp. And I love what you're doing because I think those are very practical, useful things. And then, like we talked about already, they're very transformative things where if we can solve problems and think and build that confidence and the competence, we can let that, what I call it the trickle effect or the cascade effect, it spills over to other areas of our lives. And so, like you were just saying, Jesus was a servant. But he was a very useful, very capable servant. And
Yeah.
so in a lot of ways, I'm like, if I want to be like Jesus, I'm going to be useful. I'm going to make the most of myself in every way I can so that I'm more useful in more opportunities and situations. And at least for me, it's allowed me to be an asset to my wife and to my children and to a lot of other people. I've had just a privilege and opportunity to just be there at the right time, the right place to help out. And so I
You
love what
know,
you're doing.
I would say like, and this is kind of an unprocessed thought, but like if we have a highlight reel of our life, in the end, if you could just watch it, right, there'd be certain highlights. But doing enough self-care to be dependable and reliable and to be present with our family during the times that didn't make the highlight reel, I would argue that that might be equal to or more important.
Yep.
And it's just something to for me, I like to process and think about. And it's just this like, how am I to my family when no one's looking?
Yep.
How am I to my boys when they're looking up to me as that authority figure? Am I worthy of sitting in that position? And I like to think of it like each interaction that I have with family or friends or strangers, whoever, I like to think of it like this: is like, is this interaction, this is a positive or negative type thing? Is this interaction going to drive this person further away from God, or is this interaction going to have that person remain neutral in their stance towards God? Or option three, is my action going to drive that person away from God? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's away, neutral, or towards God.
Yeah.
That we're a catalyst. I would say we always are. Like it or not, agree with it or not, we are always a catalyst.
Yeah.
And it's either, yeah, positive, negative, or neutral.
Every instance shapes our personality
Yep.
just a touch.
Yep, exactly.
And I don't and I'm not saying that I win that every time, because I don't.
Right.
But I try to do that, to say my interaction with this person is going to make their life better or not.
Positive
Sometimes I
effect
don't
or
want it
negative.
to. Sometimes, when somebody gets under my skin, I'm just like, when I
I
don't
just
fail at
rather
this,
kick you.
yeah. But like in
Yeah.
the end, it always feels better to have treated someone with respect, even if
Yep.
they didn't deserve
Or even if they didn't treat you with respect.
it. Even
Because
better.
yeah, you can walk away still, hey, I did the right thing, even though I didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Man, you said something back there that I want to it created a thought for me and I want to share it. You said something like, my preparing when my little boy's looking up at me or my kids are there. And it just made me think immediately, like, what am I doing while my kids are sleeping to be better prepared to show up when they're awake, right? In the mornings. When I get up, first one up, and I think I ought to be. What am I doing before they get up to prepare for when they do? Right? What am I doing to earn the title?
Mm-hmm.
Just because I have kids, I'm always going to be a dad, but I want to be a world-class dad. And I want to earn that, right? And it's when those times when nobody else is watching. What am I doing to earn that so that I'm ready when they wake up and I can show up for them? my wife.
I was talking about my kids to someone because that's like half my conversations anymore. And it wasn't in a negative way, but I was talking about just being a tired new dad,
Yep.
you know. And this guy had like teenagers or something, so he's further along in Dadville than I was, it was just lighthearted conversation. But the guy was like, he's like, there's going to be a last time for everything. He said, there's going to be a last time they ask you to carry him up the stairs.
Yep.
There's going to be a last time they want you to, I don't know. There's
Cuddle
going to be a
and
last
put them
time
to bed. Yeah.
to put him to bed. There's going to be a last time you change their diaper.
Yep.
He's like, so even in the things that might feel tedious now, or, you might not want to do, eventually those things are going to be gone and you're going to look back and it's going to hurt in a good way a little bit every time. It's just like, he's like, embrace the moment,
Yep.
no matter what, and that has stuck with me ever since.
100%, man.
Yeah.
Especially at my stage where my youngest is 7. Like, I knew early on with lots of kids, I'm like, okay, still I got some years. Like, yeah, I'm experiencing last times a lot now. As they're getting older, I'm like, oh, so I'm cherishing it.
I'm not ready for that.
Yeah, it's hard. And so like your stage, you're right. It's exhausting when the kids are little. But it's interesting now with me, I have 7 kids and our oldest is 22. Genuinely, brother, I miss the stage you're in with the littles. I mean, I love the stage we're in. I love having adults and teens and I love it, but I miss the little ones. It's so special. So cherish those moments, brother. And I'm doing it too. Like my little girls came over, they love to wrestle. We just got new wrestling mats. So today they were like, "Can we wrestle?" I'm like, "Yep, let's go. Let's go hit the mats." Right? And I love it. I love it. Okay, brother, this was awesome. Super inspiring, Luke. Thank you so much. Where can people get in contact with you? Where can they find you? Where can they get your resources?
So we are so first off on sojournerfieldcraft.com, and that's our website that's where folks sign up for training and everything. And you can connect with me directly through that. We're also on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Love it. All right. Any last thought for the men listening? Good guys, husbands, fathers, businessmen, a lot of disciples here, trying to do life well. Any last parting thoughts from something you've learned from your life, or just a thought you want to share?
I would say that we've got hills and valleys, right? And so whether we're the reason we're in a valley or not, it's our responsibility to remain steadfast for those that depend on us. And yeah, we might fail and we might, mess up a situation, but while we can't change the past, we can still decide our actions going forward. And honoring folks and being that man that others can rely on from today on is the man that we need to be.
Yes. Yes, Luke, even if yesterday you weren't that guy, do it today. Be that guy today. Yeah. I love that. So powerful. Brother, thanks for being on. This was awesome.
Absolutely.